Yep.
Hello, my name is Dr. Montana Agnew from the World Health Organization, and I'm also a World Farming Organization member. And these are Rachel Wolford, CEO of Northwest Timber, Dr. Sarah Carey, Portland City Planner and Oregon Tourism Board member, and Eliza Pierce, lead hydrologist for the Washington Board of Forestry. Together, we represent the Northwestern Committee for Drought Prevention and Adaptation.
I will start us off. Thank you for being here today. If I asked you to close your eyes and envision the quintessential scene of the Pacific Northwest, what comes into mind? Would you imagine sprawling rivers and lakes encompassed by vast forestry? Maybe you would think of fishermen awaiting a plentiful salmon season, healthy patrons, tremendous biodiversity, and ecological and local businesses. This was the Pacific Northwest. We have taken our abundance of resources and pretending to be sustainable has failed to trick the environment. Now, I want you to think of the future of the Pacific Northwest, a region plagued with drought. Even if we become optimally sustainable, we are unable to preserve what we were once able to enjoy in our environment. We are heading towards a region that must ration water and consequently food losses, endure exponential decreases in biodiversity, and hope to live through crown forest fires that will not only demolish the economy, but the environment as well. Consequently, regional health will reach an all-time low, and we will not have the resources to keep each and every one of us alive. If you care at all about your environment, finances, health, or future, please lend us your brief attention.
The evidence for this impending future can already be seen. As you can see here in this graphic, most of the Pacific Northwest is already in a severe state of drought. To many, drought simply means less rainfall. But when this is combined with a warming trend, the warming trend of climate change, the results are severe. As you can see here, there's been a trend towards warmer summers over the last few decades, but more importantly is the trends towards warmer winters and less snowfall. Snowpack is critical to a region. Because it stores water and then releases it as it melts in the warmer summer months, allowing rivers to flow year-round when there hasn't been any recent rain. As you can see here, these dark areas are expected to see a 50% decrease in summer stream flows by the year 2040, and this will have devastating consequences throughout the Northwest. Increasing temperature and decreasing water availability are going to create problems that extend far beyond just the lack of drinking water.
As my colleague alluded to, data from many different studies, including the National Climate Assessment Report, reveal that there is less precipitation falling as snow each year in the Pacific Northwest compared to historical averages from the 20th century. Additionally, and as a result of this, the amount of snowpack in the Cascade Mountains and the whole of the Pacific Northwest is less each year. Since around 1950, average snowpack on April 1st in the Cascade Mountains has decreased by about 20%. Here you can see an image of snowpack in the Pacific Northwest in May 2014 and in May 2015. In just 1 year, you can see a huge decrease in snowpack. Additionally, large glaciers that have historically been a source of stream flow for the state of Washington have been receding. Here you can see the Olympic National Park Lillian Glacier. From the year 1905 to the year 2010, the glacier has completely receded and disappeared and is no longer a source of water for the state of Washington. In this past year, snow levels in Washington have ranged between 71% as a statewide average to 90% in some areas of the state below normal. And in Oregon, the situation is even worse. Changes are happening now and will continue in the future. Predictions say that by the year 2050, which is in all of our lifetimes, snowmelt in the Pacific Northwest is predicted to shift 3 to 4 weeks earlier than the average from the 20th century. This is accounting for reducing our carbon emissions, not even taking into account that most likely reduction of carbon emissions will not happen. Now, why am I concerned with this as a member of the Board of Oregon Tourism? Well, this is because tourism is one of the major contributors to the Oregon economy, and Oregon's natural resources and landscape are one of the major reasons why people come to Oregon. Tourism generates approximately $10 billion each year for the Oregon economy, and the industry directly employs 100,000 people and indirectly employs an additional 50,000 people. For perspective, this is approximately the population of Eugene. Now, if tourism fails in Oregon, which it is likely to do if climate change continues to affect the Oregon landscape, making it undesirable for tourists to visit, imagine the entire city of Eugene and all its people gone. This is the equivalent of all the jobs lost, and thus the people who will have to leave Oregon to find other jobs if the tourism industry collapses. Now, a large part of the tourism industry is particularly the winter sports and ski industry. In the 2010-2011 season, the Oregon ski industry contributed about $500 million to the public Oregon economy, plus an additional $200 million to personal income. This is just one season. The Pacific Northwest is particularly special because it has offered, the longest skiing and snowboarding season in the U.S., but these seasons are getting shorter each and every year with climate change. A good example of this is Mount Hood's Timberline Lodge, which is depicted here this past summer. Mount Hood Timberline Lodge is famous because it's typically able to stay open year-round. Normally people ski there on natural snow at least through Labor Day. This year it closed on August 3rd, one of the earliest closing dates ever. And this is hugely consequential. Timberline is suffering one of the worst ever droughts it's ever faced, and gateway communities to these mountains that tourists visit are also suffering losses because people are no longer coming to these businesses, thus the economies of various cities are suffering. Oregon is additionally unique because all but one of the main ski areas are located on public lands that are managed by the federal U.S. government. Therefore, the federal government has direct responsibility for what happens on these lands. If the ski industry fails due to climate change, the federal government is responsible for not having implemented policies that will ensure that this industry can continue. All those skiers who have lost their pastime and all the workers who worked in this industry will probably not vote for the officials who let this catastrophe happen. And this is only in Oregon. Future predictions show that there's a potential for 25 to 100% decline in snowfall and snowpack in the Pacific Northwest. The economic impacts of this cannot be stressed enough. There will additionally be many secondary economic impacts because there are major companies such as Nike and Adidas that are headquartered here in Oregon, and they make a lot of their money off of producing outdoor gear and winter sports gear. If there are no longer tourists coming to Oregon, they will no longer have a need for this gear, thus major businesses will suffer in Oregon as well. The industry doesn't have many options to adapt to this. Some lodges, such as Timberline, have artificial snowmaking technology, but this is costly and time-consuming. We can also focus on more sustainable tourism and transportation, but ultimately there will need to be large changes to prevent this from happening. Further, reduced snowfall and reduced snowpack will not only have severe consequences for the ski and tourism industry in Oregon, but also for many other parts of life here in the Pacific Northwest, which my colleagues will discuss.
As CEO of one of the largest lumber companies, I'm concerned with how drought will directly affect forest fires. So, contrary to popular public belief, regular and continual forest fires actually contribute to forest biodiversity and prevent larger, more devastating fires that will not be able to be contained. In order to have these fires, we must maintain accessibility to water, and this cannot be done if it's not there. If forest regions do not experience regulatory fires and suffer from water loss, trees in the surrounding land will become dry and fragile. Consequently, when a natural fire is introduced through means such as heat or lightning, it will not be able to be contained. It is absolutely imperative to have water on reserve because lightning strikes have become more regular as access to water has decreased. What this means is that we no longer have water to do maintenance fires to prevent large-scale crown fires, but the likelihood of these large fires is increasing. Our only option is to save as much water as possible through the implementation of sustainable policies to limit individual and group usage of water. Lack of water will evoke an exponential increase in the mountain pine beetle, which are greatly contributing to pine tree mortality rates throughout the entire Northwest by plaguing trees with disease. Without water available, the beetle population will devastate the Northwest forests. While regular maintained fires promote healthy forests, irregularly large forest fires will devastate the economy of the Pacific Northwest. Nearly 76,000 men and women are employed by the lumber industry in Oregon alone. To put that into perspective, that's 1 in 20 jobs in Oregon are in the cultivation of timber. The above map demonstrates the percentage of county income that is brought in from lumber. These numbers will drop if droughts prevent the continual growth of healthy forest, which means that the overall economy of Oregon will suffer, and so will the other states in similar situations. Not only will the economy of the Pacific Northwest be affected, but the prices of softwood and plywood will skyrocket across the country as we are the #1 supplier of these goods. I cannot afford a drought. My employees cannot afford a drought because they will be out of jobs. The market cannot afford a drought because the housing market and construction industry will be devastated, and the nation cannot afford to dig themselves out of the health consequences that will coincide with the destruction of the Pacific Northwest forests. Rather, I suggest you consider a policy that will establish clean and efficient, regular burning, sustainable wood and housing uses, and the individual preservation of water.
This drought and water loss is also going to have a big impact on hydropower generation in the Pacific Northwest. Currently, 70% of Pacific Northwest energy comes from hydropower. This is great because it's cheap and it's clean. Hydropower operating costs are about 0.6 cents per kilowatt hour. In comparison, coal plants average 2.2 cents per kilowatt hour. This means hydropower is 3.5 times cheaper than coal. Plus, it's clean in terms of emissions. Bonneville Power Administration is the largest electricity provider in the Northwest, and it gets 67% of its electricity from hydropower. Annually, this comes out to 6,613 megawatts of power per year. For comparison, Seattle's average annual continuous power demand is only 1,150 megawatts. This means Bonneville's network of dams deliver enough energy to power 6 Seattles. Unfortunately, this abundance of hydropower is not going to last. With decreasing rainfall, there won't be enough water to run the turbines in the dams properly. Additionally, the decreasing snowpack will mean less snow melt in the summer. As you can see here, we've got a decreasing trend in these summer months. Because less water means less power. This drop in the summer power availability is especially important since warmer summers will increase electricity demands due to increased demands for air conditioning during these hot time periods. If hydropower cannot supply the electricity needed, power companies will have to spend money and go elsewhere to get fuel sources in order to make up for the demand. This will have large-reaching economic consequences. The price of electricity will increase because the cheap hydropower is no longer available to be used in the Northwest. This will in turn cause the price of everything in the Northwest to increase in order to compensate for the increasing cost. And this will affect all aspects of life. If people in business can't afford these new higher prices, they'll move out of the area, leading to an economic decline and collapse. Luckily, there are some steps we can take now in order to reduce the impact of declining hydropower availability. First, one is that we can expand into multiple energy sources. This includes wind, solar, nuclear, other options to provide the electricity needed that the summer month demands will demand. We can also work on better ways to store water so less is lost to evaporation. And most importantly, we can establish household limits and fines for excessive water and electricity use. All of this will help us to prevent a future where our demand for electricity surpasses our ability to supply it.
Okay, so in addition to the excellent points made by my colleagues, drought will also have a large impact on Northwestern agriculture. Agriculture has been historically and still is a very large source of income for the Northwest. As you can hopefully see by this chart, there's a large concentration of apples, wheat, and the market value of agricultural products just located within the Northwestern United States. Agricultural commodities and food production contributed 3% and 11% of the region's GDP respectively last year. Because we rely so much on irrigation for our crops, the Pacific Northwest needs precipitation, and drought will seriously hurt this. Last year, the Washington State Department of Agriculture estimated that statewide crop and livestock losses would total $1.2 billion because of the drought. In the 1977 drought, Washington's agricultural output declined by $49 million, accounting for inflation. That's $188 million today, which is about $30 million more than the cost of an F-16 fighter jet. That same year, wheat yields were down 40%, and because water outlook was so bad, many farmers did not even plant their crops. Lawmakers this year approved spending $16 million over the next 2 years in preventative measures, but frankly, that's not nearly enough. Agriculture can adapt to drought, but adaptation will occur slowly if significant changes in farm operations are required, which they most likely will be because we haven't really dealt with something like this before. Shifts to new, more resilient varieties of crops are slow and they're expensive. And breeding for drought requires long-term efforts. Irrigation and water shortages require shifts to more profitable commodities, and that's another challenge. So, in addition to agricultural losses, the region will also suffer in biodiversity. Rising temperatures will increase disease and/or mortality in several iconic salmon species, especially for spring and summer Chinook and sockeye in the interior Columbia and Snake River basins. By the 2080s, habitats for trout in the western U.S. are expected to decline by 47%, which will seriously hurt the region's fishing industry. Due to the warmer waters increasing, ecological mismatches may occur, upsetting the delicate ecosystem. Recent examples in the Pacific are the arrival of new types of zooplankton and new predators such as the striped marlin, tuna, and yellowtail, species which have never been or rarely seen before in the cool or once cool coastal waters of the Pacific. As well, ocean acidification threatens culturally and commercially significant marine species such as oysters. And finally, the drought will seriously affect people's health. This is something that a lot of people don't expect because they think, okay, well, drought, we'll still be able to find water somewhere, right? Well, that's not the only problem. Drought can cause a broad set of environmental hazards such as wildfires, as my colleague Ms. Wolford mentioned, and dust storms, extreme heat events, flash flooding, degraded water quality, and reduced water quality. Dust storms in particular are problematic because they're connected to increased rates of valley fever. Valley fever is fairly common, but it can lead to cases of community-acquired pneumonia, which is the most common type of pneumonia in the world and also a leading cause of death worldwide. Also, something that is really not discussed and people don't think about is the mental health effects that drought will have. Higher levels of depression, anxiety, and anger are expected due to the fact that people's quality of lives will be lower than they have experienced before. The most at risk for these, as always, are the poor, the elderly, and children. And this is something that I really want you guys to think about, because when this gets really bad, and it will get really bad, this is going to be your children, your grandparents, your families. Thank you.
If we don't take steps now, this is what our beautiful, lush Pacific Northwest is going to look like. This is not just possible, but very probable in the near future. The effects of drought in the Pacific Northwest will raise economic, health, and other concerns. Jobs will be lost, major industries will suffer, health problems will increase, and the environment will be altered for the worse. And indeed, the whole country's economy will suffer due to the Pacific Northwest economy suffering. So, we need to invest in sustainability in order to adapt to these changing conditions. We need to invest in sustainable technology for agriculture and find alternative sources of energy when hydropower is no longer an option. We need to invest in tourism alternatives so that the economy is not destroyed and jobs aren't lost. We need to reduce the amount of lumber we use by building more environmentally sustainable houses and buildings. We need to set limits on household water consumption and conserve water. We should learn from other regions such as California so that their today is not our tomorrow. It is imperative that we set regulations on things such as water consumption before we are deeper in this crisis and not until it is too late. This is an ongoing problem and it is not going away. We need to live in more sustainable ways and we need governmental policies and investment to help us do this. We should work together to invest in these alternative technologies and take steps to adapt. Drought in the Pacific Northwest is now inevitable. But whether or not we let humankind completely deplete the Earth's water resources, one of the Earth's most precious resources and the basis of human life, is up to us. We can still save the Pacific Northwest and prevent or prepare for some of these future consequences of climate change, but we must act now. We want to work with you to implement policies that will help mitigate these problems as we move into the future and lessen the harsh realities of extreme drought in the Pacific Northwest.